everyone, this is Rachel. So I originally filmed this video before my old computer died, and I was hoping I would get those files still from the hard drive, but those were not some of the files that were able to be saved. So I'm redoing it. One of the things I like about Booktube is I like seeing the different tags. Since I only post once a week, I realize that some of these tags are probably way late, but I still thought it would be fun to do. And so the tag that I'm going to do today is get to know your fantasy reader. I know in earlier videos I've said that I am a huge sci-fi reader. Really love, that's like my favorite go-to genre, but I enjoy fantasy a lot, and there's a lot of crossover between science fiction and fantasy. So the two that I saw do this tag that made me interested in doing it was Sam over Thoughts on Tomes and Taylor over at Made Between the Pages. I wasn't tagged by them, but I liked how Taylor said, if you really want to do the tag, do it. And so that's why I'm doing it. So for question number 1, what is my origin story, or the first fantasy that I read? Now, I have been blessed to grow up with parents who have read to me since I was a little kid. But the story that really marked me on my path as I enjoyed reading, and I was going to continue for the rest of my life, was In the Hand of the Goddess by Tamara Pierce. This is actually a second book in a quartet, and I didn't know that when I picked it up at the time, but it was so well written that I didn't really miss out on the dynamics from the first one. And it was after at the end I was like, oh, is there more? And I went and looked, and that's when I found out. So then I went and read the first one and then read the last two after that. And then number 2 is, if you could be a hero or heroine of a story, which author would you insist write you? And what is the one trope you'd insist upon? So for me, this was a really hard question to answer, but if I have to pick just one author, I'm going to choose Anne McCaffrey and space opera. Anne McCaffrey is best known for her Dragon Riders of Pern series, but she also has science fiction and space stories as well that I have greatly enjoyed. And so that's why I would like to be written into those type of worlds by her. And yes, Dragon Riders of Pern is technically a science fiction story, but loosely. Reading the first one, it's more fantasy. It's not till you get further into the series that you realize the science fiction origins, but that's really not important. Question number 3, what is a fantasy that I read this year that I think more people should pick up? And I also mentioned this in my newbie to Booktube video, but it's The Haunting of Tram Car 015 by P. Djeli Clark. This was an amazing novella. Loved it so much. Like, I read it. I've already read it twice this year, and I've read everything else that I could get my hands on by him. And I think everyone should read this book. All right, so question number 4 is, what is your favorite fantasy subgenre? And what subgenre have you not read a lot of? So my favorite one is Hero's Quest. Kind of goes with the whole space opera thing, but it's you going on a journey to get something done. I don't mind the chosen one principle as long as the chosen one is interesting, or like what they have to do, and it's not just like, well, he's destined to succeed no matter what. I don't like those Hero's Quests, but if they're like, okay, he has to learn how is supposed to do this, I like those. And the genre that I haven't read a lot about, or really read a lot, is magical realism. I'm not a huge contemporary reader, or reading books that set in the contemporary world just with magical elements on it. I like paranormal, but just with the slight differences. And maybe it's just I don't understand what magical realism is, but that's just a subgenre. When I was looking over like a list, I was like, I really don't think I read a lot of that because I don't recognize that. I mean, not that I don't recognize it as a genre, it was just something that didn't ping like, oh, I could think of all these books that's in that genre. So that's why I'm choosing them. And number 5, who are some of my out-of-buy authors? Would be Tamara Pierce, Robin McKinley. Those are the ones that really shaped me as a teenager, made me really fall in love with fantasy. So yeah, Robin McKinley, I haven't seen anything from her recently. She's a little bit older. Tamara Pierce, at least I know she's putting out like a book a year. She's also a little bit older. I'm a little bit older than average YouTubers, I think. I don't know. 6, how do I find fantasy book recommendations? mostly friends. I have a lot of friends who've given me some good recommendations. As I've gotten more into podcasts, I've been picking up different books from those podcasts. Unfortunately, well, I don't know. Though what I found is a lot of the podcasts I like listening to are actually recommending more contemporary or memoirs. I have this weird occurrence that happens is I will listen to an author. I will love hearing them speak, explain things, but then I don't like their writing. And so, and then it's in reverse. If like I'll hear an author, I'm like, oh, they're kind of boring, but then I really like their writing. So when I go to conferences or listen to podcasts, I'm just like, oh, that author's pretty entertaining. I probably won't like their book, which I know is kind of crazy. I still always want to give it a try, and I like the recommendations of the podcasters I do listen to, and the books I picked up from different YouTubers I've seen, I've enjoyed thus far. So that's kind of how I get my recommendations. So number 8, what is one misconception of fantasy that you want to lay to rest? Not everyone who reads fantasy is reading it to escape. I know a lot of people are like, oh, fantasy is escapism. For me, it's not. So just having fantasy termed as escapism really pisses me off, because I have found more insight into the real world by reading fantasy than watching politics or watching the media, getting involved in current events. And so I don't read fantasy or science fiction to escape. I read it to help inform our world, especially because we see a lot of more progressive attitudes in our fiction, in our media, like TV shows, before it becomes more mainstream and accepted in real life. So I don't think it's escapism. I think it's helping to form us as a people, and is thus important for everybody to read fiction. So question number 9, if someone has never read fantasy before and asked for 3 books as a place to start, what would those 3 books be? Oh, I can't answer that question. Mostly because it depends on what they read already. Because I think that would determine, and that's how it's been for people before. They'll be like, oh, what should I read? And I'm like, well, what do you enjoy reading? It would be a different list depending on what they have. I would try to find fantasy. If it is their first foray into fantasy, I would try to give them some recommendations that would be similar to what they have read in the past. That way they have that softball entrance. If they enjoy that, then I might start giving them, oh, here's a little bit, different type of fantasy, and go from there. At the time I had done this back in April. For question number 10, who is the most recent fantasy creator you came across and you'd like to shout out? I had just found Cecily J. Reeds, and I really enjoy her videos. I still really enjoy her videos, so I'm still gonna shout out to her. So I hope that gives you a little more insight into who I am as a fantasy reader. And if you have any questions, put them down below. Have a great day. Bye.